Most people don't know this. If you hire a lawn mowing service or probably a home cleaning service for one time,
Okay.
they don't make any money on that. Because by the time they navigate to your property, figure it out, learn it, catch up all of the deferred, cleaning up of the edges and getting the weeds out, they don't make any money on that. It's the fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th mowing of the year where, okay, now it's clockwork. I already have 5 lawns on this street. I'm knocking out your property with those. It's all, tuned up and clean, and I can roll through it quickly
Yes.
and do a good job.
Yeah.
That's how home service businesses make money.
Well, hi there, and thanks for joining us here at the Side Hustle Hero podcast. It's the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Possevi, author of The Way Success Works. At the age of 14, Bryan Clayton was kicked off his parents' couch and forced to mow the neighbor's lawn. He wasn't too happy about it until he realized how much money he could make. This episode is all about the lawn care industry. You'll hear what it takes to get up and running, how to find your first customers, the biggest challenge you could face in running the business, and what Bryan did to finally land his first commercial client. But regardless of the side hustle that you're in or want to get into, you'll also pick up solid, often hard-won business advice from this episode. You see, Bryan went on to build his little side hustle into a 6-figure business, then scaled it to 150 employees, generating revenue of over $10 million a year. It wasn't too long after selling it, he got back into business by co-founding GreenPal, a company that's been described as the Uber for lawn care. It solves pain points for both local lawn care providers and the homeowners. And while you're plotting your side hustle success, if you're enjoying what you're hearing in this podcast and you'd like to show your support, a fun way is to head on over to sidehustlehero.com/support, where you can shoot me over a large soy latte or maybe a double espresso. It really is a thing at sidehustlehero.com/support. Thank you from the bottom of my coffee cup. And if you're not already a subscriber, please join us by hitting the subscribe button. It just takes a sec and it really helps in our rankings. Thank you so much. Now here is my conversation with the co-founder of GreenPal, Bryan Clayton. Well, welcome, Bryan.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Well, given your entrepreneurial background and stellar accomplishments in business, I got so much to ask you. I want to go first back to a time when you were cutting lawns, I understand, because I know how lucrative that side hustle can be. And clearly, as you've proven, very scalable. What prompted you to push a lawnmower in the first place?
Yeah, I got started in the lawn mowing business when I was 14 years old.
Wow.
I'd like to tell you that I was like a born entrepreneur, but the reality is my dad got tired of watching me play Super Mario Kart all day, and he got fed up. He said, "Hey, get off your butt." I talked to the neighbor. They need somebody to mow the yard, and I wasn't living in a democratic household. This was a direct order. He said, "You're going to go mow the neighbor's yard," and I said, "Well, I don't cut grass. I don't mow yards." He goes, "Well, you do now," and
That's
he took me next door and showed me what to do and pointed out all the spots that I missed, and I was like, I was so pissed off, but then the best thing happened. I got paid $20 for like 45 minutes of work, and I thought, "This is where
whoa.
it's at. Yeah, this is wait a second, I can do more of these and not have to hit my parents up for money and buy all the video games I want and buy the soccer cleats I want," and so that's what I did. I started passing out flyers around the neighborhood, and by the end of that first summer, I had about a dozen customers and stuck with that business for 15 years.
Really? So did you skip university, college?
I should have.
Oh,
I did go I did go to college, so it wasn't my intention to be a lawn guy for my whole life. It
okay.
was it was very much a side hustle in the early days, and then when I went to business school but I went at night, so I would mow grass all day and then go to school at night, and then so my side hustle became now the way to pay for college and buy textbooks and pay my rent, and so I didn't go to college because I wanted to pursue this path of owning a lawn business, but
Right.
After I graduated college, I was forced with a very practical decision. Okay, what now? Are you going to go into the job market and take a pay cut or
Right.
stick with this lawn company? And so by the time I graduated college, I think I had one full-time helper and one part-time helper, so I had a little small business going, and I thought, "You know what? This could be my lane. Owning this business and growing it could be my lane, and I could build this into something big." And I took what little I did learn from business school and made a little business plan and on a yellow legal pad, and I thought, "Okay, if I can just if, it's me and 2 guys, if I can just, like, do that 5 more times and have 5 crews, I could make $1,000,000 in a year gross." And I wrote out what might go into that, and I said, if I can do this in 5 years, that will be worth it." And I ended up doing it in 2. And so after that, it was just a no-brainer. I thought, "Okay, I'm just gonna stick with this business and grow it and to be, as successful as I can," and eventually grew that to about a 150 person company. It was making over 8 figures a year in revenue, and then it was acquired by a national company in the landscaping business, so they bought the business in year 15.
And that company that you were growing was called Peachtree?
Yeah, called
Yeah.
Peachtree Landscaping, and it still exists today.
Wow. And so when at the point where you left college, how much was the company grossing then? Do you remember? Ballpark?
You know, I remember that in 2003, a college graduate could make 40 grand a year.
Right.
And what's sad now 20 years later is not much different. But that's another kind of conversation. So I remember that was a number in my head, and I remember my taxes were like 80 grand. I was making $80,000 a year, almost 6 figures
Right.
mowing yards in the year 2003. And so I thought, I really don't wanna be a lawn guy.
Okay.
Uh, I hated the lawn mowing business, but I thought, if I could build this into something scalable, if I just did it right. And so it was grossing a if I was making 80, it was probably grossing 200.
Right.
And I just needed to compound that 4x before I had a real business. It wasn't until I started making at least $1,000,000 a year in gross revenue that I consider myself to actually have a business. And until that point, I was self-employed, and so I kind of had to learn the hard way what the difference meant between being self-employed and owning a business. Took me a long time to figure that out.
What's your definition of that?
Well, so I don't mean this to be derogatory. It's okay
No.
to be self-employed. Being self-employed is fine. I know many millionaires that were self-employed for 20 years, and they took that revenue from being self-employed and
Exactly.
then reinvested it in high quality, durable revenue like rental properties and equities and things like that. So
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that, but being self-employed is very different than being a business owner. A business owner is the difference between working in the business and working on the business. And so the business owner is doing both. Whereas self-employed person is spending 95% of their time working in the business and maybe no time working on the business. They're taking orders and then they're going and doing the work. And maybe they have some helpers, but
Right.
the minute they step away from it, it evaporates.
Right.
Whereas the business owner cultivates systems, processes, routines, brand, marketing systems, training systems, all of these different processes to build an actual humming, thriving, well-oiled machine that they can step away from for a week or a month. And a really good business owner can step away from a month and come back and it be better.
Yes.
Anti-fragile is what that's called. It's like not only will it survive without me, it'll actually grow without me because I put in the right system. So that's the key difference between being
Yeah.
self-employed and being a business owner.
That thing actually happened to me, Brian. There was a piece of one of my businesses that I was always looking after. And I took off, let's see, it was about 6, 8 weeks to do the Camino walk in Spain and
Nice.
was trying to be out of the loop as much as possible, which I was. And I came back and somebody else had taken over this piece of the business. And I'm like, oh my God, she's doing it way better than me. This
Fantastic.
is
That's
great. I need to go away again.
such a great thing. And that's rare. That's the product of I'm doing the right thing, setting it up for that type of success. That just doesn't happen, so that's great.
Yeah. So I guess your ability to see that it was going to be a business that had that potential was when you were crunching the numbers and figuring out, okay, if I scale this thing to $1 million, that can happen. I'm curious where you got that mindset from. It was that from your family or was that from business school?
So, I really was the first entrepreneur in my family, and so it really wasn't that. Other than my dad forced me to get off my butt and start a little small business. Thank God he did that. But
Mhm.
the where I got really lucky was that I was in a growing, thriving community that was booming. And so Nashville, Tennessee, Middle Tennessee is what the region is called,
Okay.
has just been growing for 30, 40 years steady. And so there were all kinds of new swings at the plate, I guess you could say. New shopping centers, new houses being built, new apartment complexes, new office complexes, things like that. And all of these businesses needed landscaping installation, needed landscaping maintenance. It's never going away.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just that the local market was thriving and I could um I could benefit from that, which I did, but I saw evidence of other business owners also doing well. And I thought, well, look at this company that's in the bricklaying business, or this company that's in the excavation business, or this company that is in the same business as mine. And I could look at them and kind of reverse engineer what they were doing and then apply it to my business. And so that was what gave me the validation and the I guess confidence that I could grow this because I guess I could point to other examples that were doing it well. But not only that, I could see a gap in what they were doing and do it a little better
Mm.
and exploit that. And so it was kind of twofold. They were doing great,
'Kay.
but also there was an opportunity that I could do a little bit better than them. And at the time, the internet was just getting rolling,
Yes.
and none of them were marketing online. And so I just kinda inherently just decided to tinker with that, experiment with that. And so for 8 years, I was like one of the only landscaping companies marketing online, and it's not like that would, solve the problem of sales, but it helped.
Sure.
And so there were several things that I was able to take validation and inspiration from the environment around me, whereas if I had grown up out in the middle of nowhere and, in Tennessee, you keep it the same state, but if I had just grown up 100 miles west or east in a rural area, I
Right.
might not have had that same opportunity, and my path might have turned out very different. So I think there is value in where you live. I think there is value in where you market and operate, and that's important to note.
Mhm. Yeah, that's certainly true. Certainly for any sort of hands-on product businesses like you've, got
Yeah,
going
ex
there. You mentioned commercial and industrial growth as well. Were you doing just residential properties, or did you expand into commercial as well?
really good question. So it started off just as basic residential services. So homeowner needs to get a lawn mowing service. They need somebody to pull the weeds in the beds. That's what I did.
'Kay.
You can't really scale that type of business on these, 30 or $40 visits. It's just impossible. The economics are just too tight.
Even with the subscription model?
Yeah, even with a subscription model, because it's
Okay.
it's it's just the economics are so tight on what it costs to operate the business,
'Kay.
what labor costs, and the competition is so fierce that you can't recover all of the overhead. Now, it is an awesome business to run small, lean, mean as a solo operator, like I was doing.
Right.
But if you wanna have 10 or 20 employees and break 1,000,000 or 2,000,000 in revenue, it's gonna be really tough. I'm not saying you can't do it, but it's
Right.
it's going to be really tough. And so I was learning that coming up in the business, and I thought, well, if I really wanna, because my goal was always to get to $10,000,000 a year in revenue, and I thought, well, if I really wanna get to $5,000,000 a year in revenue, I'm not gonna do it on these $20 lawn mowings.
Right.
So I then began to make a little plan of, okay, well, I got to reinvent this business to be a commercial based business. And so, how do we go after this commercial clientele? How do we win them? And it was really, really hard to break into that. And really, a residential lawn maintenance service is a totally different business than a commercial lawn maintenance service. Same thing for pretty much all services. Cleaning, for example, your commercial cleaner that cleans a hospital is not the same company you're going to call to come vacuum your house. And
Right.
so I had to transition the business and reinvent it. And along the lines of doing that, I realized I wasn't in the landscaping business at all. I was in the sales business, and that I needed to spend all of my time tuning this sales process and figuring out, okay, what services, what sectors are we going to attack, and how are we going to identify the decision makers, and how are we going to pitch them, and how are we going to try to close business and keep business. Took about 5 years, but I started to really kind of break into that, and I got my first client, which was a McDonald's restaurant, and I got them by proving to them that we could do things different, like clean up the cigarette butts in the drive-through when we mowed the grass, and we pitched that to them as a way to sell extra apple pies in the drive-through,
Sure.
and so we were looking for all kinds of unique ways to pitch our services, and it took a long time just through trial and error, but as time went on, 5 years, maybe give or take, I was able to completely invert the business to be 100% commercial, and then ultimately that's what it became. We were doing, 9-10 million dollars a year in business, and it was all commercial clients.
Oh, okay. Very nice. And I love that piece about differentiating yourself. What can we do better than the competition? How can we help? With also with that eye of, okay, how much more is this going to cost me to provide this extra service like cleaning up the cigarette butts?
Totally, yeah. What's the competition not doing? And let me do that. Otherwise, you're just selling on price, and that's a race to the bottom.
Well, I was going to ask you one of the things that you did to delight your customers and then become fans. And I think you just answered it with one of those examples.
You really have to compete in a competitive business like that. And I don't know. I wanna say the lawn mowing business was super competitive, but I think all business is super competitive. And,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter what business you're in, it's going to be super competitive. So, you have to look for those angles, and you have to look for those gaps, and you just have to outwork your competition and figure out what they're not doing
Right.
and outserve them.
And that doesn't matter whether that's that 5 or $10 million business
Never
or
ends.
the self-employed person that's just got their own set of equipment that it's doing it in the evening and weekends.
That's right. It never ends. Even if you're just doing 100K a year in revenue, you're still gonna have to have a strong value proposition. You're still gonna have to do things better than your competitors are, and at a price that doesn't have to be cheaper, but it has to be fair. That applies at every level of the game. Nobody's going to pay you more for a service when they can get it elsewhere for the same price, and nobody's gonna pay you for a service or a product that's just not good, and
Right.
so that applies.
And you gotta find a way to get your foot in the door too if they're already using somebody else. Right.
Totally,
Yeah.
and that's one thing about this particular business is that, there's low barriers to entry, so a lot of new entrants come in every year,
Okay.
but also there's, like, a high churn rate. A lot of them kinda just disappear, and so
Yes.
if you can just show up, the Woody Allen quote, like, 100% of success is just showing up. If you can just show up, that's half the battle in this business.
Absolutely. And I find that with all generally with all contractors
Yeah,
and tradespeople, really, if
yeah,
you just show up, you're on time or earlier. I have a friend who's doing phenomenal in the construction business because when they tell their clients they start at 7 a.m. At 7 a.m., they're swinging hammers. They're not
nice,
just putting on their tool belt or grabbing a coffee. They're
nice,
actually working, and it's that work
nice.
ethic that really differentiates. And anybody can do that.
Well,
Um,
and the reason it is that way in contracting and a lot of these businesses is that nobody teaches any of us how to run a small business.
mm,
And so contracting businesses, whether it's home cleaning, home painting, every home services business pretty much, lawn mowing, the way these proprietors learn is just through negative interactions with customers. And sometimes they never learn. Sometimes
yeah.
they just run a bad business. And so as consumers, we're like, what the hell? Why can nobody like run a business just with common sense and show up? Well, it's because nobody teaches any of this. And so
Yeah.
you don't learn this in high school, you don't learn this in business school. And so the way these business owners learn is just through trial and error.
Sadly, Brian, that I I totally agree with you. But
Yeah, it's just the
then
way it is.
yeah, but then there's the opportunity then for the side hustle person getting into the business. And
That's right.
if somebody did want to get into the business and reach, say, that first threshold of a gross of 100,000, I know it's going to depend on the market because you got different equipment costs and licensing. But if you were looking at, say, grossing a 100,000, what if that would be net before taxes as
If
a
you're
ballpark?
doing all the if you could probably do 100K in revenue solo.
Yeah,
And so if you're doing all of that yourself, you can take home 70, 80 of that easily.
really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you definitely could because your expenses are your equipment, fuel, your truck, and you don't have to buy that stuff new, and you could definitely take home 80%. And so, if you're looking at the prospect of driving for Uber or working a job somewhere, you can make 70, 80 grand easily mowing yards 9 months out of the year. Especially, fast forward to what my company now, GreenPal, that's what GreenPal does. It's a platform that
right,
connects sole proprietors like this with people who need their services. And it's astounding how quickly these proprietors can get to 100 grand or and beyond. We have many that are doing over $1 million a year in revenue.
right.
Also, there is a reversion to blue collar trades. Nobody wants to do them. Nobody wants to do these types of services. It's hard to find reliable services. So there's a big opportunity there. And I think you're going to start seeing a lot of people realizing that. It's like, man, I went to school and I got a, I don't know, public relations degree, and I can't find a damn job. I guess I'll go paint houses, and before you know it, that person has 2 or 3 employees and they're doing 300, 400K a year. You
Yes.
see those stories all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think you're gonna start seeing more of that.
In a smaller community, I had an Airbnb that I was running, and the difficulty in finding a landscaping person, Brian, oh my gosh, that person could basically, and he did, like, charge me whatever he wanted
Yeah,
because
because,
it got to
if
the
you gotta go
point.
find somebody else, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely opportunity in a lot of markets, I think. And then eventually there was somebody that came in, and he was the type of individual that you and I have been talking about, the one that goes the extra mile and does a really good job and shows up every week. It was wonderful. And
Oh, yeah, and
yeah,
they'll be successful.
and they get the referrals.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, which is probably where one of the places that you're finding if you're coaching people, and we will get into Green Pal about that. Delighting the customers so that you get referrals. Uh,
Yeah, it's not something we're taught, and it's part of what GreenPal does is as a kind of a coach in a box almost, is to get them to understand that you have to be proactive as a business owner and not reactive. And so part of being proactive is reaching out to your client before you service their property, managing their expectations, and then being proactive following up after the fact. Were they happy? Were they not happy? What could you do better? Don't take that personally. The problem is
right,
most sole proprietors, most business owners take that feedback as disrespect or as criticism, and it's like don't take it personally. That's happening for you. And so nobody teaches any of us any of this. And if you can operate in a proactive way and get those referrals, that's your cheapest marketing. That's how you get to 100K, 500K in a million. No successful business at any size can be built on unhappy customers. And if people aren't referring you, that's a signal that they're not totally wowed by what you're doing.
mm. Getting the referrals and getting, in the case of the lawn maintenance, those scheduled subscription.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. Repeat business is what drives this industry. I mean, no, most people don't know this. If you hire a lawn mowing service or probably a home cleaning service for one time,
okay.
they don't make any money on that because by the time they navigate to your property, figure it out, learn it, um, catch up all of the deferred, cleaning up of the edges and getting the weeds out, they don't make any money on that. It's the 4th, 5th, 6th, 10th mowing of the year where, okay, now it's clockwork. I already have 5 lawns on this street. I'm knocking out your property with those. It's all, tuned up and clean, and I can roll through it quickly
Yes.
and do a good job.
Yeah.
That's how home service businesses make money.
Mhm. And so where would you suggest people be finding their clients? Someone focused locally?
Yeah. So let's say you're working in a cubicle somewhere and you hate it, and you're like, you know what, to hell with this. I'm just going to go start my own lawn mowing business. Well, first off, don't quit the cubicle job just yet.
Right.
Like let's keep that. But like nights and weekends, we can get up to 10 or 20 clients. And how do you do that? Well, I mean, these days it's easier than ever.
Right.
25 years ago, we didn't have Facebook Marketplace, Nextdoor, Yelp, Google My Business, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Like there's like all kinds of ways to reach people for free. And so that's what you need to do. You need to start putting ads on Craigslist for free. You need to start posting in local Facebook groups that your services are available. You need to start posting in Nextdoor that your services are available. You need to start posting pictures on Instagram and geotagging them locally. I mean, you just do those four things, you'll get busy really quick, and you'll get to a point where you can do some back of the envelope math and figure out, okay, I got 20 customers making $50 each. Like, if I can get to 100, then I can quit my job, or whatever that math looks
Right.
like. And
Yes.
and 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 that's how you can break in and get this business going and then take the winters off. A lot of lawn care companies do that.
Right.
Or make a plan and grow it big, or don't.
Right.
Make a little bit of money and buy rental houses. I've seen a lot of guys do that.
Yeah. Or if they're in the northern climates, they go into snow plowing in the
Snow
winter.
plowing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are some of the biggest challenges somebody would run into running the lawn care side hustle?
So some of the biggest challenges are, again, nobody teaches us how to deal with any of this stuff. So we kind of just shoot from the hip and fly by the seat of our pants. And the main metric is money in the bank. And if there's no money in the bank, oh, something's wrong. If there's money in the bank, everything's going okay. And that's not how to run a business. You have to really, even though it's just
Okay.
you have to drill into the unit economics of whatever it is you're doing. And so what I mean by that is, how much is a job, how much are you quoting a gig for, and how long is it taking you? What are your expenses? And what are you making? And could you pay somebody to replace you and make a margin? And so if you're mowing a yard and let's say it's $100 and it takes you 2 hours to do it, you're grossing $50 per man hour. And so
Right.
that's kind of your unit. That's your widget you're selling, is labor hours.
Yes.
And you have to do the hard work. The hard work is not the back-breaking work of mowing yards. That's hard work, but you have to do the difficult work. The difficult work is putting all this into a spreadsheet and tracking it and saying, "Okay, I worked 75 hours last week against these jobs, and this is how much I'm making per hour and how much I'm quoting and how much I'm billing, and where am I messed up? Am I not efficient enough? Am I not quoting high enough? Am I not organized enough? And am I losing time on drive time?" Because if you can't nail those fundamentals, then you cannot throw employees at it. You cannot step on the gas, because then you'll just go broke really quick. And you'll wake up one day and your helper or two helpers needs a paycheck and you have no money in the bank. That happens to pretty much every business owner, is they can't make payroll. And it's
Mhm.
because they've worked really hard in the business and they haven't worked on the business at all. They haven't really drilled into the unit economics of the business, which are not that complicated. It's literally just m- it, making your own spreadsheet and tracking this. You don't have to overthink it, but you need to measure it. If not, you're going to wake up and the one metric that most small business owners run by, money in the bank, is going to be overdrafted. That's happened to me, and it happens to every business owner.
Yeah. That's such valuable advice, Brian.
I wish I could tell you that I did it right all the time and I never made those mistakes. No, I've made every one of those mistakes. And so learn from my mistakes.
Yes, it sounded like you were talking from experience. And I was
Yeah,
just going to add that if
unfortunately.
if the person doesn't have, I mean, that's not their skill set, you need to find somebody that can go through those numbers with you.
Well, the problem is that a lot of founders believe their own BS and think, "Oh, I'm not I don't have the skill sets to literally like track this stuff." And that's just being lazy. It's like,
Mhm.
"No, you worked 12 hours yesterday. You billed $580, divide those two numbers. You can do that. Let's put that in a spreadsheet." No, and it's like
Yeah.
I see this all the time. It's like, well, I am not this, therefore I can't do this. It's like, well, you better figure out like the 80/20 of what goes into that thing because you're going to have to pick it up and you don't have to have a title to do certain aspects of your business and
Yes.
most of it's laziness. It's and this is, this is me too. I have neglected these aspects of my business at times and then the bill comes due for that. And so yeah, do the difficult work. Do the hard work, but also do the difficult work.
Yeah. And something as regular as taking that gross income and setting aside the amount that you know is going back out on taxes. That's not your money. You know you've got
Yes,
to remit
that's
it.
that's that's
Like,
that's another big piece of it. Yeah,
don't be spending that. It's not your money. Sadly, it's
that's
not.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a big piece of it too, and nobody teaches us that, and
Yeah.
so every small business owner, has this moment where like, "What? I owe 50 grand?
How'd
I
that
don't know
happen?
how did that happen? I don't have that."
That's
And so, yeah, don't, you'll make that mistake one time, hopefully, and don't repeat it, and so, yeah, being proactive about that as well. You would think in high school that they would have a small business class that would teach people this, but no, everybody has to learn this stuff the hard way, even today.
mm. I'm curious, what's more lucrative for the contractor? Going in and doing lawn care on like a big palatial estate with the huge lawns or more the average size lot getting it in and out?
So it's a really good question. My belief is that you're better off just going with the easy commodity and knocking out 20 stops in a day that pay 50 bucks rather than going and spending all day on something that pays 1,000. Because for a couple of reasons, the bigger job is probably, if they're not happy, you're going to lose that, and that's a big chunk of your business.
Right.
And the other thing is just a lot more hand holding there, and a lot more headache, in my opinion.
Okay.
Now I've
Yeah.
ran businesses that had both, and, it's hard to it's hard to scale a company on $20 or $50 lawn stops, but if I had to choose, I'd rather have 20 clients that pay me 50 bucks than one that pays me 1,000.
Right. So your dad kicks you out of the house, and that's the beginning of it.
Yeah, thank God he did.
Really? I think it was Mario Brothers, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
Super
it's like
Mario Kart.
yeah.
Super
Okay.
Mario Kart, yeah, the Mario, version of, like, racing golf carts and
Yeah.
still love that game.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And dad. So then
Cool.
you grow this thing. I understand you sold it.
That's right.
How is it
Yes.
doing when you sold it, and why did you sell it?
Yeah, so it was doing 8 figures a year in revenue when I sold it, and I came to the decision to explore getting it acquired about year 13. I realized something that I was no longer growing and evolving alongside the business. It wasn't like I had conquered the world or conquered, my industry or anything like that, but I had
Right.
kinda reached a point of plateau where it was a lot of the same problems every day, and I had built that business to kinda run it forever, and I didn't realize that I was evolving into a whole new person every year or 2 while growing that business, learning
Mm.
skills like leadership, management, systems, processes, accounting, strategy, copywriting, you name it. You're gonna learn all of these skills running a company, and, like, that was, in a way, fulfilling to me. It was passively fulfilling, and I didn't know it as it was happening, but when it kinda plateaued, I became discontent. I
Mm.
was no longer being rewarded by this journey of running this company, and so I thought looking back, I understand it clearly. I didn't understand it then, but I thought, "Well, this isn't fun anymore, and I'm making good money, but I'm not enjoying it." And so I thought, well, I'm just gonna do like one of these guys did, and I see at these I would go to these conferences all the time, and like, oh, here's a talk from a guy who sold a $50 million business, and I'm just gonna do that. How hard could that be? And I quickly realized, like, whoa, you have not built this business to get it acquired. You have built this as a lifestyle business and not as one that could be sold. And I had to kind of reverse engineer and take the business down to the studs and rebuild it from the inside out in order for it to be able to get acquired. And That took 2 years. And so after I got all that done, I kind of fell in love with it all over again, but at that point, it was time to create the space for the next thing. I didn't
Right.
know what the next thing was going to be, but I thought, I'm gonna create the space so I can do something else, and that ultimately ended up being GreenPal, which is the Uber for lawn care, but I didn't know at the time, but I had to sell the first company to then pursue the next thing.
I want to pick up on something Brian and I talked about, and that is how you're showing up to your clients. It really comes down to being treated like you want to be treated. Show up on time. Better yet, 5 minutes early. Be polite, professional, be responsive to your customers' communications. Do a job that you're proud of. And then you'll get a better response when asking for referrals. And that leads to greater revenues and a better net profit. And when the customer does have a complaint or concern about the job or the deliverable, remember, it's not about you. It's about something that they feel is off or needs to be corrected. Regardless of how wrong you think they may be thankful that they're bringing this to your attention. Because whether you feel they're correct in their viewpoint or not, in their eyes, their concern is quite valid. This is how they're seeing it. So instead of them just being pissed off and telling their family and friends what a lousy business you got going, they're providing you an opportunity to either provide them some information that they weren't aware of, or clarify some misunderstanding, or correct something that truly went awry. I remember a customer I had in my self storage business. She would be out of town for long stretches of time, and she came by one day and told our manager that there was a bunch of mouse droppings in her locker. Well, the manager took a look, and sure enough, there really was quite a bit. Our manager asked if she had any food in there, which was prohibitive because it's an attractant, and she swore up and down, nope, no food. So I got a phone call about this, and I said, look, if the customer doesn't mind leaving her key behind, I'd really like to take a look and see if I can figure out what's going on. So the next day, I opened up the locker. It was pretty small. It was 5 feet by 10 feet and only about a third to half full. I started carefully pulling everything out, and sure enough, towards the back was a box from her kitchen. It was filled with spices and crackers and pasta and all great snacks for mice. I ended up pulling everything out, giving the locker a really good sweep, and then putting back her stuff. We ended up keeping the box of food in the office until she was by the next time. But I called her and told her what we found, and of course she apologized profusely. Oh, I forgot that was in there. I am so sorry. But the key point I want to make is up until that moment, she was convinced that my facility had a rodent problem, which wasn't the case. But reality didn't matter because in her mind, her perception was the truth. So my objective then wasn't to take it personally and to dig into my position like, no, we don't, but rather let's take a look and figure out what's really going on. And even if I couldn't find the source of the problem that day, at least my client knew that we were taking her complaint seriously and that we genuinely cared about running a spotless facility. And that goes a long way. I mean, you've likely experienced that. You've run into some problem or difficulty with a company. And when someone there is trying to be helpful and make it right, you tend to be more patient, more understanding than if they had gotten defensive. In our next episode, Brian returns and we talk about his company GreenPal and his learning experiences along the way. Out of necessity, the guy taught himself to code. How's that for a pivot from lawn care guy to techie? Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find links to Brian's GreenPal website, his LinkedIn page, and the full show notes at our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you're enjoying what you're seeing in this podcast, I'd be so grateful if you would take a moment and add your comment, share the episode, and please subscribe. It'll let others know that there's valuable content here to help them start or grow their side hustle. Thanks for watching, and hustle on.